Amy, it's about 2 o'clock. I guess we should go ahead and we'll get started with the program. We want to be conscious of everybody's time today, right? I mean, they're salespeople like us. They are probably busy. So, you know, we're going to respect everyone's time that's joining us here today. Let's get started. So, you know, I want to thank the participants that are online with us today. And what we're doing here at Oasis is we have discovered that us, and combined with our partners, have some unique perspectives and some expertise in various areas. And we wanted to share that with our clients, potential clients, business partners, and other people in the community that are out there. And we're starting our 6-month-long kind of content series with sales and marketing. It's so important right now to get this information out into the marketplace so that people can, you know, take advantage of perhaps some new techniques, some things they haven't thought about, some market data that's available out there, and with the intent of unclogging the pipeline, right? And that's always, as sales leaders, what our call is and what our struggle is. So today we have 2 main panelists that are going to be talking. That's me. I'm Matt Simons. I'm the VP of Business Development here at Oasis Solutions. I have worked with sales teams as small as 4 and as large as 15, generating as little as 1.5 million in new revenues per year, and up to 25 million in new revenues per year. Joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Amy is really focuses on the behaviors behind selling and growth. And I kind of focus a little bit more on the strategy of sales. And so when we kind of combine our 2 perspectives, I feel like you'll hopefully get a lot out of what we have to say today. So let's talk about unclogging the pipeline. You know, why does it take so long anymore to close a sale? And I've slipped over to another slide here, Amy, but this is the modern buying cycle. And if you look there, you see the green boxes that are, this is kind of the big deal stuff, but look at all the different steps that go in there. And the problem is, I wouldn't call it a problem, but it's the reality of where we are with today's buying cycle, is that there are multiple people with multiple perspectives, with multiple agendas coming to the table and making up these buyer committees, which are now between 4 and 6 people. So while sales used to be more of a linear type of exercise in the past, you may be dealing with 1 or 2 people, things like that. Today, we have a lot more people. So today, what we're going to focus on when we talk about unclogging the pipelines, giving some information about why sales cycles are taking so long, and hopefully give you a few action items to take away and to just improve your overall sales prowess with your sales teams.
Well, shorten that time frame. Is it any wonder, Matt, when you look at that, how that so many business owners lack confidence in their own pipeline because they don't know what is real and what isn't. So I'm looking forward to you highlighting those areas that we can actually cut some time out of those pipelines and get to what means a real deal that we can actually have confidence in. So
I think that's one of the most important parts, Amy, is that, is what is real, right? And so if we're forecasting as sales leaders or even as salespeople, are we giving correct information to the leadership team or to the ownership team about what our cash flow is going to look like in the next, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and beyond? So, you would think that big purchases would, take the longest to buy, right? According to Gartner research that was released in 2019, the average time to buy something that was over $25,000 was a little over 16 months. You think, well, 16 months, that doesn't sound right. I mean, we're closing deals, 3 or 4 months, things like that. Even if we have a long sales cycle, maybe 6 to 9 months. But the problem is that your salesperson's not involved in all of this process, right? People are consuming content in different ways. They have so many different places to go get that content now. They're only actually engaging salespeople for about 15% of that sales process. So when you're looking at this 16 months, your salespeople are involved for about 2.5 months. It used to be that that information, only the manufacturer had it. So you had to engage that sales rep to get that information. Now, with blogs and third-party sites and videos and so much access to information, the buyers are actually scoping you out or scoping solutions out before they ever engage with you. And that's even on things that are less expensive to buy. It's showing the average time to buy something that's just over $5,000 actually increases to about 24 months. So people aren't pulling the trigger on things in a 1, 2, 3 month process typically, unless the need is great enough, right? So what we want to talk about today is really three key issues. Why are sales cycles taking so long? Why aren't we converting more deals? And how can we increase sales effectiveness? And so the first area that we'll jump into, Amy, is, why are sales cycles taking so long out there today? I think all sales leaders that would be joining us today would realize that these are your biggest time sinks that extend your sales cycles. It's establishing a business case, effectively establishing a business case, demonstrating the solution, this time that's spent on demos, overcoming objections in the sales process. And then for certain types of businesses, whether that be software or manufacturing, et cetera, you have to do a proof of concept in many cases. And people want to do that with their own data or their own experience in the marketplace. So what's taking so long for these sales these days is, this is all according to Gartner research, and this is over 573 people in all these cases, up to 800 people that were identified and surveyed that had bought, something of either 5,000 or above or 25,000 or above in the last 12 months. People are revisiting those parts of the sales cycle. So when I pull this up and tell you that this is the modern buying cycle, you can see why people are, taking so long. There's turnover, right? What if someone changes in the process? The problem changes, or as you start to explore solutions, sometimes, Amy, you can realize that you really didn't have the problem identified, or with the help of some effective communications with someone like a effective sales rep, you can build those requirements and realize that you need to revisit other parts of the buying process. That's something we're seeing, in the marketplace frequently, and it may or may not be with or without your participation or your sales rep's participation.
So they're going back internally and they're cycling through what they believe the real problem to be, because they can't get their handle on it, or what the possible solutions are. And if they don't fully understand the problem, I can't believe they're focusing on the right solution. And the experts that can help them solve it, the salesperson, isn't even in the game.
It's not even in the game typically. So all this stuff is happening in a repeated fashion, and are slowing those deals down. So a salesperson finds out about a problem, something that's going on, and then it may take months. It's called going dark, or they're not communicative, or they're put it off to another time. And then buyers are also revising those business cases and even their short lists. So you'll get started down a path, one of your sales team members, and according to Gartner research here, we're looking at over 90% of the time, people are revising their vendor shortlist that they thought they came into the equation with because of new information that they consumed while they were researching. Or almost 100% of the time, they're revising that business case. And I think that comes from what we talked about earlier, is that the different perspectives that are coming into the room change the business case. When you add the IT guy, when you add the finance guy, when you add the HR guy, when you add and I say guy, gal, you know what I mean? When you add that role into the mix, that can change the business case. So over 90% of the time, people are revisiting those vendor shortlists and business cases during the sales process. So
expensive. That whole if I had only known comment is probably one of the most expensive things ever involved in a business.
Oh, absolutely.
If I had only known, and then they have to circle back. Wow.
Well, think about the things that you've purchased in the past when you didn't have a clear business case identified or a problem identified, and then it didn't solve fully the problem because it wasn't the right solution.
So far most of this is on the buyer side, which means to me that there's a great deal of time in that sales cycle that can be cut out simply because we're leaving it to them to figure out on their own.
Absolutely. With the right guidance. If you can really guide your customer of how to buy, and we'll talk about that coming up, and really hammer on those business cases and pull out the sense of urgency and all those things we'll touch on in a minute. That's how we're going to cut some time off here. I mean, according to the research, almost 2.5 months is on one or all of these factors, right? Cost is always going to be an objection, right? Those are things that we're just, you're never going to get around cost unless, we can do an effective job up front of setting the price range with the expectations of the problem solved.
Yeah. So if there was an arguable point here, Matt, I would say they might argue over price, but I will come in with what the problem's actually costing them before they ever are able to overcome that. So yeah, their price objection is a little bit different than a cost objection.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything costs something. If you've been budgeting for it for more than a year,
that's right.
You're already paying for it, right?
Yep.
And one question that I see sales reps fail to ask, and it's not on enough discovery sheets, even if you've done a pretty good job of giving them some enablement tools, is what other strategic, plans do you have this year? What other planned projects do you have that may derail solving this problem, right? I've gotten to an end of a sales cycle, previously in the past and learned that hard lesson. It's like, yep, check, we need to do it. Check, we want to use you. Check, everything looks good. Oh, by the way, we're rolling out a new website and are implementing a CRM. We need to push this out about 9 months.
Right.
So my projection just went out the window.
Right. So one thing on that, and that people's compelling reason, people buy for their reasons, not ours. We all know that. Right? Their compelling reason to change, their compelling reason to buy has, in many cases, shifted in the last 120 days. And so without truly understanding that or having that level of connectivity, we may be selling the wrong thing to the wrong problem because their compelling reason to buy has changed. Same solution is going to go on board, but their reasoning and who's involved in the decision, all of those things may have shifted dramatically in the past 120 days. Matt, I don't know if you're seeing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The reasons people were buying solutions that Oasis offers a year ago may be drastically different now. I mean, when you move all of your operations off site and you need, you realize that you need cloud-based software perhaps to have more visibility into your financials or to your CRM or to your business continuity in general, right? So are we messaging to that? And that's something that we certainly want to be cognizant of and revisit on a regular basis.
Right. Yep.
And which goes back to, so here's an action item for this particular part of what we're talking about. Sales reps have to be able, from the very first sales meeting, identify the business impact that your solution is going to be able to come in and solve. What is the problem? And have we identified the real root of the problem? And then can we go in and, can we document the impact that that's had to the business? Can we size that out? How much money is that? Is that a lot of money? Right? I mean, it could be $1 million problem. If it's a $200 million company, it's not a lot. It's something we may solve, but, may not.
Yeah.
And so we have to justify our engagement and the cost of our services, no matter what they are, whether it's widgets, whether it is, software, whether it's solutions, consulting, by really finding that business impact and hammering that from the start. And then let me ask you what you think about this, Amy. I like to set price expectations up front, kind of in a range. Once we've got to the root of the problem and we know what we're dealing with, we can say, here's how we can help. And typically a solution like this would be between X to Y. What do you think about setting those price expectations up front to figure out if you're in the game or not?
I think very early expectations are important because they could just disqualify themselves. However, prior to that, there's 2 things, Matt, that you have just talked about. And there's one word on this slide that means a lot to me, and that's the word impact. As a matter of fact, it's the name of my organization, right? Impact Sales Systems. I believe people don't change because of their problems. They change because of the impact of their problems. And for us as salespeople, our job is to get to the level of impact that the problem is creating for that business. So in that discovery, Matt, is that when I can discover the impact to the business, the total cost of the problem, then I'm totally happy with sharing what that range looks like, because then it has to be in comparison to the level of the issue. If they don't realize they have $1 million problem, right, a $100,000 solution may sound frightening.
That's correct.
And so it's in that range, but I think there's some quick ways to disqualify tire kickers or bring the right people that own the problem and its impact into the conversation much earlier than in that 16-month window that some people face. Yeah,
that's another good point. We may touch on this in a later slide, but if you're talking to one person in the organization, you may, as a salesperson, you think you've got something going here. If you're not talking to everyone around them who feels that impact right? You don't really have anything. Another great action item on here too that I use frequently is I believe that stories sell. People want to hear both success and failures, right, that are relatable to the situation. So we try to mitigate the risk and the trepidation with maybe putting a new system in or a piece of machinery in, et cetera, with reference stories about how the solution that you provide has helped someone achieve business goals, right?
Sure. And I love when those reference stories are around how similar issues have been dealt with. People that were experiencing this kind of an impact. I don't suppose you guys are. So those reference points are a very safe place for other people to engage in a conversation with you and not feel like they might have overextended themselves. I like it.
So when we're talking about time sinks, demos are popular, right? I mean, 47% of people cite demos as the most valuable sales interaction in the process. 58% prefer those demonstrations as a call to action. But guess what? Demos are very popular with tire kickers too, because when you add on the additional, slide here with the additional information, I mean, 59%, think about that, 6 out of 10 buyers responded to vendor sales and marketing when they were not buying. We just want to learn more. We're staying ahead of the curve. We're, as a sales rep, you've got to be able to identify those tire kickers quickly in the sale and qualify or disqualify them from the deal process, or you will spend time in this lengthy sales process. I don't know about you, Amy, but our demonstrations at Oasis, it's about a 2-hour process.
Wow.
And that's really just the high level demo to get them to ask the questions of where they want to see the sub demo. So it's really about a 3-hour process. Right. When it's all said and done.
So, one of the things that I often see in demos is that sometimes they're being presented to an unqualified prospect.
Right.
And so that might be and they may even be someone who could buy from them, but they haven't qualified themselves with what the issues are. And so what can happen is that demo can turn into a monologue disaster, right? Or there's a technical requirement that a technician provide the demo and the salesperson is almost in a sidecar. And so what can happen is there's a distinct separation between the problem the prospect has and exactly how the demonstrated feature or function will solve that issue. And so we leave too much in the air for the prospect to figure out. And so that to me is that qualified demo means I know how to show you, Matt, which feature and benefit gets rid of this portion of your $1 million problem.
That's
and
right.
Then ask you, how do you think that solves? So I think there's some ways to make the most powerful tool the best tool at the right time.
Absolutely. And that's what we want to stress to the sales leaders that are here today. We all want we make part of we get our CRM, we set it up, we have our sales stages, and then towards the end, it's like demo. Well, you get to a demo, and it's like, all right, we got something going here. So salespeople too often want to start an introduction call and then say, we're ready for a demo. Now, in some sales processes, that's what you do, right? You have to show a bit, at least part of a demonstration to kind of do that qualification part of it. But in many sales cycles, it's more about qualifying the deal, finding out more information about the pain points before we jump into the demo.
Can I ask you a quick question, and it kind of goes to proof of concept as well for both of those points, is how often do you see in that stage and when demos are happening that brand new players come to the table? People that have not been, you don't know if they've been involved in the conversation previous. They then can become either an audience member, which audience members don't buy, they're entertained, or they can actually be sitting there building their case against you because they haven't been involved in the conversation. So I'm really hoping that the folks you're talking to, Matt, are taking the opportunity to qualify everyone that's in the room with their perspective of the problem before they dive into the technical side of their demo.
Yeah, I think a great question that not enough salespeople ask is, who besides you is involved in these types of decisions? Who can veto these types of decisions, et cetera, because you want to get all those people in the room.
Yep. I'm okay with new people coming in the room, but I got to know why they're there, and they have to know why they're there.
Absolutely. So then we talk about your demo goes well, then you get a proof of concept, and that's only for certain types of sales. It's typically software. is going to involve that proof of concept, but the client wants to test or trial the solution using their data. You got to wait to get the data. The data is incomplete or insufficient. They got to scrub it up. You're waiting to get the data. Waits for the technician or the IT person to find time. Then the solution goes live, and then you wait to finish testing. I mean, you just threw, I don't know how much time onto your sales process, but I mean, at least a month, if not 3 to 6 months on your sales process in a proof of concept. I think what we want to, if you have proof of concept, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because not everybody on the call today has proof of concept in their sales cycle, and we can talk more about this offline with anyone that's interested. But what you really want to do is create an atmosphere where proof of concept is easy, where data is passed seamlessly, and we can cut out all those steps of waiting on the client. You know, this is a story that we've made from an anonymous company here, but it was a caller verification software, and by creating an API with a pre-configured server and able to pull that data in really quick, they were able to get these proof of concepts up in just a couple of days, and someone is live with their data and they're testing it. You're not losing the momentum of the sales cycle working with 1 or 2 users and the tech guy, where those other roles that you talked about, Amy, that are involved in the decision making are kind of like, well, wonder what's going on here because I'm not involved, right? And so you have to make those proof of concepts flow faster so that you can keep the momentum of the sale.
Yeah, that's good. You know, all buying decisions, Matt, and you and I have talked about this in the past, all buying decisions start and end in an emotional state, right? I want, I need, I'm no longer happy with. And so that emotional condition that allows people to make a decision, they're justified logically, but they're decided typically emotionally. That emotion gets lost the more interruptions and the more protracted that reason for buying or the whole buying cycle becomes, right? So when you're in this stage and you can cut out those extra meetings, those extra conversations, or gosh forbid somebody be an email to make decisions or provide information only, it can substantially reduce that cycle.
Absolutely. So action items on here. You may have never thought about this before, but we want to, you know, you may want to be strategic with your demos and your proof of concepts, right? I mean, you can, with modern technology, we can meet demos in a scalable way. I suggest using MicroDemos as a marketing asset. You should have 2 or 3 minute vignettes on parts of impacts of your solution that can be divvied out to people that are at different points of the sales cycle. Or sometimes it's kind of a consumed content, right? Or define those clear qualification gates in your sales process for these full demos. I mean, before you give that 2-hour demo, are we there yet, right? Have we identified the players, the problems, the impact before we involve a sales engineer, probably our senior vice president of sales, the sales rep, you know, whoever, all to come together and spend 2 hours of their day on a demo. Right.
It's probably one of the most expensive 2-hour gaps in any business, right? When you put all of that horsepower in one place.
Yeah.
You know, and what's interesting to me, Matt, and again, whether it's a demo, point of proof of concept, or any other stage, people's process and compelling reasons to buy may have changed in the most recent 120 days. Right? The reason for what needs to be demonstrated could be because they now have a distributed workforce that wasn't a concern for them this time last year. Heck, it might not even have been on the radar. Right. So why people are buying may have shifted. We got to be in front of that.
And then when you get these proof of concepts, if that's part of your sales cycle, we've got to define what success looks like and the time frame that success can be demonstrated in up front. If you don't have a path to purchase prior to that proof of concept and a success criteria is laid out, so if we do this, 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 we're good to go, and our next step is buying, you are walking down a slippery slope by just opening up the sandbox to play around in, right? And so if you've had that proof of concept in there, I would encourage you to have those success criteria, establish a path to purchase, and then try to innovate your delivery methods as much as possible to save time and keep that momentum rolling in the sales cycle.
Right, very good.
So we're moving all quicker in the content because that was the largest part of the content here, is why is the sales cycle taking so long? Now, why aren't we converting more deals? We know why it's taking so long. why aren't we converting more deals? And we've touched on some of these concepts already, but it's really that line between qualification and disqualification. As salespeople, we want at bats, right? We want to get those at bats and we want to get and swing away, but not every pitch is meant to hit, right? So sometimes you just gotta look for the strikes and the close balls and not swing at the high and outsides. And that's really hard to get at. And I know, Amy, you do some great training and teaching around that in your business, and you know, how to really get to that. And then also we're going to look at how messaging today, remember we talked about, here's the buying cycle again. Here's 4 to 6 people that are on these committees that are looking to get to the purchase finish line, and how your messaging can affect if you're weak with that messaging. And then what's your value proposition, right? How do you stand apart from the competition? What do you do different? And are you telling people that, right? Right. So qualifications change, right? I mean, you know, it used to be budget, authority, need, time frame, and urgency. You know, if you got to those things, you had it. Not that those are gone by the wayside in 2020, but nowadays, you know, authority can be diffuse. It can be, you know, different levels of authority across an organization, especially if the ownership is off-site, or, you know, there's those authority, you know, stop gaps are placed on different sites, for example. People's needs are diverse. We talked about that. People come to the table with different perspectives, different ideas, different, you know, how's this going to affect me? The HR person wants to know, how's it going to help us retain people? And the finance people knows how it's going to be a return on investment. And you can imagine the other scenarios from there, IT, et cetera. Yeah. Maybe the time frame's wrong. You know, I talked about asking that question earlier. And then urgency is relative to every role at the table. Just because the person you started the conversation with is very urgent doesn't mean the organization is urgent with solving this problem. So some things you might look at for signs of real opportunity is, how many active stakeholders do you have involved in your conversation? As I said earlier, if you're talking to one person who has that problem, maybe it's the controller, maybe it's the IT person or whatever. If it's a large purchase or larger purchase, you've got to get more active stakeholders involved here, so that you get a clear picture. Would you say that's correct, Amy?
Absolutely. The decision-making process and problem ownership, you look at operating systems that are getting integrated into businesses in order to distribute decision-making. Absolutely, there are stakeholders, and what you're measured by is different than what I'm measured by, and what goes into your decision and your portion of the budget may be different for me. So those, I want that conversation to happen in front of me, not outside of me. So bringing those active stakeholders into the conversation early, I think, is key.
And then another way that you can tell if you've got a real deal is you have to have tools in place, not just CRM, but CRM and marketing tools, sales enablement tools. If you haven't heard the word sales enablement and you're on this call today, maybe we should talk, you know, because that's you know, that's a modern technique and system that needs to be part of it. But if you can't see how people are consuming the content that you have, whether they're coming inbound to your website, they're downloading white papers, they're reading blogs, or when you outbound and you send emails, they may have attachments, links, etc. You need to see who's consuming that content, how long they're consuming that content, and who else they're forwarding that to, right? If you see that people have a pattern of consuming the content you see, then you know you have something. If you go into a call and you see nobody's opened your email or your link, you know you're starting at ground zero, and that's important to know.
So it's such a disadvantage to have that information available and not gain access to it. That is how people make decisions. That is a new sales strategy. So anybody working without that kind of visibility into the behavior of their buyer, to know what messages are resonating, which ones fall short, which ones are working in certain industries, what's that shift that people are experiencing right now, it's a complete disadvantage to be operating without it. Absolutely. I mean, it's what puts us on equal footing. It's an expectation to have that kind of access. So without, that's why I say a disadvantage instead of that being an advantage. Can't go without it.
And so I think we've really harped on this a lot in our conversation already today, but what's the degree of the business impact? Is that a lot of money? Is it painful? Does it hurt now? Have you been budgeting for it more than a year? And if you have, then you are budgeting for it. It is costing you money. And then what is that cause for change?
So can I speak to that for just a quick second? I know we're watching time, but people might look at you like you're crazy to say that budget is irrelevant, because that's the number one excuse people get from a prospect that says we don't have a budget for it right now, or capital, cash is being held on to. My experience is that business impact has everything to do with the cost and losses associated with the problem you're fixing. So the budget is buried inside the business impact. The budget is what they have been dealing with for any period of time. And if I can restate what you said, Matt, that is, if a business has a problem that has existed for more than a year, they have actively been budgeting for that problem. If somebody has a $100,000 issue because of either reworking, redos, warranty issues, mistakes that get made, whatever, that $100,000 issue, if it's been there for more than a year, they have been budgeting that into the way they operate their business. So I completely agree with you on the right-handed side of that.
The tough part too for sales roles is that with all the different buying, groups and committees that are out there, there's a lot of different roles that can disqualify you. And I've seen it in all different ways. I mean, it could be IT, maybe it's not secure enough, or it doesn't fit into the IT plan for this year, or whatever. Perhaps it's your risk management department, venture capitalists. You can come sometimes all the way up to the CEO goes, yeah, we're going to do this. Oh, and we don't know who else besides you, right, is making these decisions. And so sometimes it's a VC group, right, or procurement, finance, all these different roles that come to the table is insane compared to the way it used to be maybe just 10 years ago. Let's talk about messaging. So if people are consuming your content when you're not around, if the sales rep is only involved in 15% of the sales cycle, then your messaging has got to be strong and it's got to be consistent across the board, right? So things that immediately disqualify salespeople a lot of the time is a lack of clear differentiation. You sound like everyone else, and there's no price difference, there's no action difference, there's no service difference, whatever quality difference. And if there is, you have not articulated that very well. Additionally, you may have a low quality sales presentation, right? You come in, it looks antiquated. It doesn't answer the questions. It has confusing or contradictory material. And then additionally, Amy, you and I actually talked about this just yesterday for a little bit offline, was prices are misaligned to expectations. So as you mentioned, if you can't identify a $100,000 problem, then a $50,000 solution is not going to work. Or you said the vice versa to that is you're priced too low. Everybody else in your space is maybe at 50,000 and you're coming in at 20,000. People say, that doesn't sound right. Yeah,
right. And what that means, where it's relevant, just missed the boat. We quoted the wrong thing. We tried to put a rocket where a Volkswagen would work, or we are trying to put a Volkswagen and they're actually knowing what they need is something much more complex. So couldn't agree more.
So we touched on some of this earlier, but the way to really increase that conversion is to articulate the business impact of your solution from the first meeting and hammer back to that. You're always going back to, correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm pulling my notepad up. Correct me if I'm wrong here, prospect, but you said, right, has anything changed? And if it hasn't, then there's, you have to go back to that business impact.
And I think you got to be super ready that things have changed. People are working at a pace of change inside their own operation at a faster pace than they ever have. So the likelihood that things have changed, pretty darn high right now. You got to go back, circle back to it. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, use your points of differentiation consistently. I mean, that's key. But my favorite of these last two, tailor the content that you have out there by role, by industry, and or like KPI, right? Somebody's looking for a certain performance indicator. But if you have content it's all similar, but if you have content that speaks and appeals to the IT person, the same content that is slanted slightly for the finance person, for the HR person, for the operations person, et cetera, you're able to then speak their language throughout the sales process and get that business impact that's tailored to their role, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I advise people always to test the content with your partners and even your prospects, and of course your trusted business advisors. I mean, if you're rolling out some new content, You know, send it to some, you know, great existing customers that are already your champions. Send it to a business partner. Send it to someone and say, hey, read this through with me. You know, how does this ring to you? I know you're a finance person. I know you're a IT person. Does this make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So to that point, if you don't mind, on those KPIs, right? So different roles in the organization measured by have different measurements. So to be able to align my message, my presentation, my discussion, my questions around how they're measured. But it is okay to ask people what, if anything, has shifted in the way they're measuring success in their role in their business. In the current environment, those things have shifted. And so as an active advisor for my prospect or for my customer, I should know how they're being measured today and what, if anything, is different about that than they were, say, this time last year. How have they had to adjust? What's the next hill to climb? That's part of our job as a salesperson.
Wow. Powerful. So finally, how can we...
Matt, don't get me started.
Yeah. So how can we increase sales effectiveness, right? So I mean, there's just a couple of things here, but they're big things. You know, 77% of buyers, B2B buyers, stated that their last purchase was very complex or difficult. People want to buy easy, right? They want to see the path. They want to, you know that the process, the map has an ending, it has a start and it has an end, and they don't want to see a lot of loopity-loop lines in between there. So we have to be able to guide customers through their purchase decision, and when we do that, we increase our effectiveness by an average of about 1.5 times. If we can give people clear recommendations, a clear reasoned path to make that purchase decision, and advise them on buying best practices, maybe even produce something that's industry specific, how to buy the best boot dampers, or how to buy the best, paper products or software or whatever it is that you're selling. I think that really can eliminate a lot of confusion and help people to, especially when you cite third-party, information. This is not like provided by Amy, Rudy, and Matt Simons. This is provided by Gartner or whatever your industry, specific.
Validating conversations for sure. And
then this is the tough part. I mean, so many people want to be consultative, and I get that. Part of being consultative is to ask the right questions and to really identify the business case and the business impact, but don't react with multiple scenarios, alternatives, and information on all the different scenarios, right? Well, we could, I think you really need to do your best to figure that out without saying it, out loud, thinking out loud, right? So, let me prepare my response, think about what you've told me here today, and can we get back together next week, and I'll have some recommendations to make how we could help, right? And that way you can tailor those scenarios down to one or two, and make sure that that information is concise and doesn't lead us all over the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Buyer enablement helps, to reduce time and effort. Buyer enablement is a concept similar to sales enablement. Sales enablement is a concept that says I'm going to give my salespeople, not just on the training side when we're bringing on new sales reps, but also on the buying side, the right content for the right role at the right time. And all they have to do is go and look at the playbook and say, we're right here in the sales stage, send this content. Well, buyer enablement is the same thing. It helps the buyer to reduce their time and effort. It gives the customer guidance at different moments. And this increases conversion likelihood by 2.5 times. So when they're just researching, we need to give them maybe a how-to guide, how to buy the such and such, but different diagnostic guides or templates or tools that allow them to see data that they need to know as a buyer, but not coming with like on a sales slick, if that makes sense. Do you have experience with that, Amy? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, actually, I was looking at a question from the audience when you said that. As long as these tools help people identify and maybe measure their issue, I think those pieces are important. I think if they are, if they can start a conversation, if they can start some activity from the prospect, I think that can be tremendous. If it's a supporting tool from a salesperson, fantastic. But by itself, I think that it can become noise and actually work against us.
Absolutely. Very good point. So as we mentioned, sales enablement capabilities can reduce administrative workload and help and develop and augment salespeople. And so that's, I would encourage you to take a look at that, at sales enablement tools. If you haven't, I've looked at several and even implemented one in a previous role. And that just gives your salespeople, it takes the thinking out of it. One thing that we don't want salespeople doing is developing their own content, their own off-brand pieces and one-off, presentations, and developing their own slicks that are off-brand and off-message. We want to give them the right content to deliver to the right role at the right time, right? And so our slide is showing where different people have worked with different sales enablement providers and helped to shorten sales cycles by length or grow their pipeline by a certain amount.
So if I could speak to that for a moment, Matt, and that is where I'm seeing the most traction and effectiveness in a sales team, particularly right now, is where owners and leaders are pulling the sales team together to figure out what are they hearing from customers right now, what are they hearing from prospects right now, to see what do they need to know from us, where can we be more effective in our marketing message. The people that haven't figured it out are continuing to allow marketing to operate in a silo, and they're struggling to figure out what message is resonating. I can get from A to B really quick if I put the frontline voice and start asking those questions. So I would encourage business owners and marketing leaders to sit down with salespeople and help them to find questions they need answered. Even in a disqualified prospect, somebody that's not ready to move right now, there's 2 or 3 key pieces of information that would allow us to make direction. Why are you even looking at making this type of a change right now? What, if anything, has changed in the way you all make decisions right now? And so there's a tremendous opportunity for us to leverage what our salespeople can gather and then utilize that team-wide. And we might have to give them more direction on what we need answers to.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, we have great marketing people out there, and if they're not getting the information that is the feedback that the salespeople are hearing every day, and they're disconnected, then they spin their wheels in some ways.
They'll keep putting out a message, Matt. They'll keep putting out a message. It's just going to be slightly misaligned, which means that we're wasting energy.
That's right. Absolutely. So we're going to start summarizing our focus areas here. We've talked about business cases today, right?
Yep.
How to hammer those in from the start, how to qualify the deals or disqualify the deals. And that's just as important of a technique as qualification. And they kind of go hand in hand. How to handle objections and how to not even handle objections, but sometimes to circumvent objections by providing the right material with the problem that's already been identified. So if we identify the right problem, we can provide the right materials to overcome objections before they even happen. How to set qualification gates for demos so that we are not just spewing out the demo just to anybody that says, I want a demo, right? Yeah. How we can tighten up our messaging to support sales and so that we don't disqualify ourselves from deals once we get further down the pipeline. If we're in a proof of concept sales pipeline, how we can shorten those by having our technology ready to pounce on those when they happen. And then it all ties into your value proposition. How do you differentiate yourself, from the competition? How do you ask the right questions and provide true value as a consultative member of the buying process? One of the greatest things I heard at a conference I was at last year, and I use this all the time, Amy, is that modern buyers don't want conversations. The old sales rep that would yuck it up and just, come in and they want nice people to do business with, but they don't want conversations. They want information. And they'll take a conversation if you can provide them valuable information. Yeah.
Let's suppose they don't want casual conversation or how do you do or how are the kids? They don't have time for that. And I encourage salespeople to not to make a phone call that's a check-in that says, how are you doing? How are you holding up? Checking to see if you need anything. I don't know a phone call I have less time for. Well, I appreciate your offer. No, we're good. But if I picked up the phone and I said, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z, what are you guys seeing? Or I wanted to share with you some of the things we've learned. They're open to that kind of a a real meaningful conversation. Matt, before you go to this piece, could we go back one slide? I wanted to mention something.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how often you see this, but every one of those steps, so important, but there's so much information that gets lost because it's trapped in the salesperson's head. And so the use of a solid CRM, or where there's tooling, how that is designed to pick up and capture that information. Like, imagine if you had a field in your CRM that had the answer to when the problem was first identified by the company. That's going to tell you the difference in time from when they started talking to you about it and when they identified it internally. And if you're telling me that you have been dealing with this issue for 2 years, Matt, you can't tell me you haven't been budgeting for it. So
Right.
you can't come to me and say you don't have a budget for the solution. So there's so often information, what's different about the company. They're just not capturing those important pieces of information and then putting them in the hands of people in the organization who can make strong decisions based on that. Next week, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories of some major learning curves where people have just left money on the table and how they could have captured it. My biggest challenge with CRMs and not properly using them is key information gets buried in a comments field as opposed to being put in a field that can be measured. Please don't tell me that the CFO is leaving one of your key accounts and just bury it in a comment field. I'd rather you have an activity that says major client event so that people in the organization can run a report about major client events. So leverage the data coming through your sales team, because there's more money sitting on the back of that information very often than some of the more lagging data points.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's what I do is, we're all in different businesses here, but that's what I do is that we help businesses to not only leverage, modernizing their technology, but to, when they set up a CRM, and what are we really looking to get out of that? It's too easy to just like, oh, we just want their contact information and what, opportunities.
Yeah,
I get that. Okay.
Back to 1982.
Yeah, right. And we need that information, but what else could we get out of that? I mean, and you just give an example of that, and we've already went through these recommendations. So I want to talk more about what's coming up, and we've gotten, I appreciate the Q&As that came through, and I appreciate our Director of Marketing, Philana Callahan, who's been moderating the session on the Q&As on the back end. But people want to hear more of the information that we had to share, Amy. And so what we're doing with this executive sales series, it's going to go through August 11th. It's really just it's 3 parts. And the first part we're talking about, right, unclogging the pipeline. We're going to repeat this content with with fresh commentary. We're going to do this live again next Tuesday at 2 p.m. So tell your friends, tell your neighbors. But then additionally, Amy is going to take over and do the next 2, the part 2, and that's going to be called Winning on the Hill. Tell us a little about what you're going to cover there, Amy, starting July 21st.
Thanks, Matt. We're going to talk about winning on the hill, which is actually a reference to bicycle racing, so racers, right? The idea of winning on the hill is one that, you can't really make up a lot of ground on competitors going downhill in a bike race, right? You pick a line, everybody's working with gravity, and unless you wreck it, everybody pretty much ends up pretty similar positioned, right? Only the weak or, the timid or the scared get past, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of winning on the hill is one in which in the climb is where we can typically pick off competitors, where we can gain ground on competitors. The people that win on the hill tend to be better trained, better conditioned, stronger mindset, more aggressive. They have more grit, more determination. That's where we are. We and our competitors are all racing up the same hill, and the ones that are more committed and have better tooling and have better conditioning are the ones that are going to pick up that ground. So I wanted to share with you all during that session very specific things that we can do to overtake our competitors. Some of them are already putting themselves out of business. There's market share to be picked up on the hill. I'm going to share with you some specific strategies for selling in that current environment. What the work is, what to do that your competitors won't do. That's how we pick up ground, right? That conditioning we do every day, now's the time to put it to work. Winning on the hill is strategic. winning on the hill is aggressive, and we might have to get out of the saddle. That means standing up to pedal, but that's what we're going to talk about on the 21st and 28th. So I'm looking forward to it.
So you can go to our chat section and you can sign up for those. Don't forget, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, you're going to get a live survey coming up right here at the end as soon as we sign off. And so fill out that survey. It's just a couple of questions, help us make our content more relevant to you. But I already saw a couple of messages that came through where folks are enjoying the content, and I appreciate that. If you guys are interested in learning any more, make sure you contact me here at matt@oasisky.com, or we'll see you on the upcoming portions of our sales series, which will be every Tuesday at 2 p.m. All right, thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks.